Well, welcome, Andy. Thanks for getting on the call with me today. I appreciate actually your suggestion that we have do a little series of your implementation process with Proshop. I think that's awesome, and I look forward to talking to you today and over the next several weeks as we get you ramped up and using Proshop.
Thanks, Paul. Thanks for having me. I'm really looking forward to it. Kind of going to be a fun little adventure.
Yes, it sure will. It sure will. So let's start by just telling folks a little bit about you and your history and the history of your company.
Well, I am. My grandfather bought the company in 1994, and that's when we became incorporated as Ripley Machine and Tool. I purchased the company from him in 2015. I've worked here since I graduated high school in 2011. We've got about 15 to 20 employees full-time, depending on what you consider full-time, and about 15,000 square feet worth of machine manufacturing space. We're predominantly CNC production, CNC turning, do a lot of centerless and internal grinding. We do some CNC milling, some other secondary operations, basic assembly, but not a whole lot of assembly.
Okay, awesome. Do you do a lot of repeat work or a lot of brand new jobs or a mix of each?
Yeah, a majority of our work is usually repeat work. We've been in the last 3 or 4 years, we've been significantly growing. So with that growth, we're seeing a lot more repeat work, or excuse me, new work than we used to. But most of that is we do it for the first time as a new job, and then it becomes a repeat job for us.
Nice. Okay. And tell me a little bit about your system, the way you handle jobs and quoting and work order travelers and things like that. What was that looking like?
Well, currently we have this very outdated, we'll call it an ERP system. I believe it was kind of set up back in the early 90s, more so for like industrial supply companies, or maybe basic assembly companies, really not meant for a machine shop, and especially not meant for a full scale, one size fits all type of package. Very just not modernized. A lot of key punches that you have to know kind of exactly what order to hit the right keys to be able to utilize it. We were using that for our accounting and for really purchasing and order entry, shipping, all of that until I took over in 2015. Now we've basically we use that for order entry and job travelers. Then we use QuickBooks and a lot of Excel sheets and binders to keep up with the rest of the tasks.
Okay, so all your work instructions, tool lists, and things are all in paper form today?
Yeah, I'm in a binder.
In a binder. Okay.
You can actually see the whole binder shelf over my shoulder there. You know,
we're
proud of how organized we keep it, but now we're going to be really proud when we get rid of it.
Nice, that's awesome. And you moved to QuickBooks for your accounting now?
Yeah, we use QuickBooks for shipping and accounting.
And is that the desktop version or the online version?
The desktop version.
Okay. Very good. So at what point did you start looking at, or how did you even first learn about Proshop, or what was the process like of starting to research any kind of new ERP system at all?
I don't really remember exactly how it came to me that we really needed to come up with an ERP system. I'm pretty sure just from various trade organization meetings and reading through trade magazines, I kind of knew what ERPs were out there and knew that we definitely needed some improvement, but I don't know how I came to the decision that it was time to look into them. I just know that I went to the 2018 IMTS with the main objective of trying to find an ERP that worked best for us.
Okay. I imagine where there's some actual pain points of like, whether your setups were going long or you realized you didn't have the right material for a job, or there's some things that were actually happening on the shop floor that were also kind of triggering for you that you need to resolve these things and come up with a better solution?
At that point in time, there weren't, but as we progressed through kind of knowing, I think that's when our eyes were open that what an ERP system could do.
Mm,
And as we started to progress through that kind of that waiting period between then and now, there were a lot of pain points that we realized could be addressed.
okay. All right, sure. Now you mentioned to me that you learned about a certain podcast when you were at IMTS. Tell us about that.
Yeah, right in the main area there at IMTS in 2018, we saw all the graphics of the making chips. In fact, what caught my eye was if you're not making chips, you're not making money, because as having an employee that was walking with me through the concourse area, I kind of pointed that out and said, we're not making chips right now even. So
That's
um,
true. Yeah.
definitely got hooked on that, or that's when I first heard of them.
Okay. And then I think you mentioned that you actually heard about Proshop on one of those episodes. Is that true?
Yeah, if memory serves me correctly, kind of once I got back from Chicago that year, a lot of days coming home from work, I would throw the Making Chips podcast on and listen to it on the way home, and usually listen to it the rest of it going into work the following morning. And after listening to weekly, I said, well, I should go back in time and listen to other ones, and came across the podcast where they were talking to you.
Mm-hmm.
And that one was a very interesting one. I specifically remember pulling in from my drive home and still having about 15 more minutes, and I just sat there in the truck and listened to the rest of it because I was really kind of hooked.
Awesome. Yeah. Yeah. Jim Carr of Car Machine and Tool, one of the hosts, but also a customer of ours. So we've been on the show a few times, but I know he's certainly passionate and it's helped them quite a bit. And so when he speaks about Proshop, it's kind of humbling for us, to be honest, but it's great to have him be able to speak from actual experience. So then you reached out and there was some discussions with us and some demos and stuff, right? Can you share a
Yeah,
little bit of
right.
that?
I believe right that night while I was sitting in the truck listening, I think I searched you on LinkedIn and added you and kind of sent you a short message. And we had some conversations back then about potentially exploring the opportunity of coming on board with Proshop. Being that we had just got back from IMTS, we were kind of sitting there with several different options, and we knew that or when we heard what Proshop could do, we kind of knew that, or I knew right then and there, that a lot of the questions that I was asking the other ERPs, and they were kind of saying, well, what you can do is you can bypass it by doing this, and a roundabout way of doing things. And when I heard about Proshop and spoke with you guys, I knew that you guys weren't just bypassing or doing it around the roundabout. It was set up for that purpose of doing those things.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. For those that haven't heard of Proshop in the past, we owned our own machine shop, as you know, called Pro CNC. And when we were in the same shoes that you were in, we were doing research on ERP software, and we couldn't find anything that didn't have to bypass this or that or have separate spreadsheets or still paper forms. And so rather than buying one of those systems, we just hired a software developer and had him work right alongside us on the shop floor for years and years, building Proshop to manage a job shop, machine shop, and so yeah, I appreciate your comments on that. It was definitely out of a lot of pain and our own personal struggles that we built all the features that Proshop has.
Yeah, we appreciate the pain that you went through to
Yeah.
get us to the point. That was just I just remember specifically before hearing of Proshop with discussing that with numerous ERP systems while at IMTS, and then conversations from there, and just asking those questions of what about gauges? What are you doing with gauges? Where Proshop had a specific answer. Here's how we handle it. Here's, it's right in this right in this module, and you get it all. It was just perfectly set up for that. Whereas other companies, it was like, well, you can tell the software that it's this.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, well, that's not quite the way we're looking to do it. The idea of this, we're trying to eliminate some of these not doing things the right way.
Sure. Yeah. All right. So post IMTS, you looked at the several systems. You decided that Proshop was probably the right one, but you still didn't pull the trigger then. Can you elaborate a little bit on why and what was going through your mind?
Well, we were kind of in a spot where we were doing a whole bunch of things at once, a lot of work. We were putting in a couple new machines, and it was a very hectic time. And with hectic kind of comes usually a tough cash flow standpoint.
Sure.
So we kind of just thought that in order to dive as deeply as we wanted to into an ERP, we needed to wait for a more opportune time when we could afford it and when we just had the time to be able to do things the right way and not just throw everything onto the software and hope that it works.
Hmm. And I think you also said that ProShop was, or at least that, because you were tight on cash flow, you considered doing some kind of cheaper options, but decided ultimately that wasn't the right call for you.
Yeah, we had talked with a couple of software companies and we were, there was one in particular that obviously we would be saving a decent amount of money to go with, but it just was it was lacking in areas that it's like if you're going to make an investment, why not? What's the difference of spending a little bit more when you're going to get a significantly bigger ROI for what it's worth? So we knew at that point in time that Proshop was the answer. It was just a matter of kind of when, not if.
Okay. And then we were talking just a few days ago, I think, and you mentioned about being introduced to a little bit more of some of the lean concepts and Paul Akers from FastCap.
Yeah,
Tell me about
something
that.
about those Pauls from Northwest America there.
And I don't know if you realize, but FastCap is in the same town that I live in and our shop was. I mean, our shops were probably 10, 15 minutes from each other. And so, yeah, Paul and I know each other and we visit his shop and take some guys over to see some of the lean stuff they were doing. He's definitely an inspiring guy. Pretty cool company.
Yeah, I would kind of get confused once in a while between the two of you before obviously I got to know you better, both of you better. It'd be like you would tweet something, I'd be like, oh, is that the lean? Nope, that's the Proshop guy, or vice versa, or something on LinkedIn. It was like, why is he talking? Oh, wrong guy.
Well, he's not a bad guy to be confused with. Paul Akers is pretty cool.
No.
All right. So then, so were some of your thinking and sort of evolution of the way you were thinking about lean manufacturing, did that sort of tie into your decision about ERP and eventually pulling the trigger?
Well, when I was first introduced to the 2 Second Lean book from Paul Akers, and it was one of those books that you pick it up and you say, oh, I'm going to just read a chapter here and there, and before you know it, it's 2 a.m. and you just read the whole thing in one night. But one of the big takeaways that I had from that book was the fix what bugs you, and really putting an emphasis on that as you look at what wastes your time, the way that Paul talks about it. I mean, I remember from his book talking about building a little thing to hose off the underside of his lawnmower.
Yeah, I've seen that video.
Yeah, that's the extent that Paul takes the lean and just more so fixing what bugs you, what takes a lot of your time.
Right.
And as kind of the end of last year started to progress, I was really just trying to implement some of that into the shop and just look at where do we waste our time. Unfortunately, that list was pretty long.
Yeah, as they are. Yep. So you had mentioned something about not having the right information to set up jobs and having your setups go smoothly and according to the targeted or estimated times. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, well, I think across the entirety of the shop, we were seeing instances where just a lack of information was causing wasted time, and really we were having guys would be running into the office to ask me questions that were just things that should have been known or at the very least easily explained by a work order or by something. So we were seeing it all the time. It was just ridiculous what we were seeing for waste. I remember specifically one day that it was actually my birthday last year, and I ended up leaving at 6:00 in the evening, but early for me because I was so frustrated because we had a job we had to get set up, and we knew the part was very hot, and we knew what was coming as soon. We had a quick changeover, and we had to get right on the parts, and we kind of knew this a week in advance, and we kind of had prepared for it. Well, the part required a British tap and a British thread gauge, obviously, to check that tap. Right. And I don't remember now which was missing, but one of them was, of course, missing. And I had several times had said, check out this part, make sure that there's nothing that you need or anything like that. And so we ended up spending 2 or 3 hours just looking around the shop halfway through a setup for a tap that we typically stock several of. And if we don't stock it, MSC or somebody has it next day.
Right. So in that example, do you remember, did you find the tap, or did you have to let the machine sit overnight while you overnighted one in the next day?
I think what we ended up doing was we let it set. We got one overnighted in the next day. Right. I think what ended up. Actually, I think it was a pipe tap. We had the tap. We didn't have the gauge. Okay. So we just tapped the parts just shallow, and then had to go back in and rework them.
Chase them later.
To get them to depth, which is kind of a pain manually off the machine. But, it got the parts at least to a point where we could get them finished and get them to our customer on time. But it just, things like that were happening and still do happen on a regular basis in our shop. And as you consider what all of us manufacturers are up against, trying to become more lean is just such a critical thing to do. And when you're wasting time on things that shouldn't waste your time, read through Paul's books, listening to him talk about what they're doing in Japan, chasing after seconds, is incredible when you consider we waste hours looking for a tap that should have been addressed a long time ago.
Yeah, and going back to the making chips slogan, right? You're not making chips, you're not making money.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the two concepts can really be morphed together. Fix what bugs you and keeps you from making chips, because that's what we're after.
And all those times you were saying the guys would come in to ask you a question, very possibly the machine was sitting as well till you can answer it. And that's also
absolutely
tying you. I mean, I know you work crazy hours, but there's times where you'd like to take some time off, go hit a golf ball, and you can't do that unless they're calling you every 10 minutes on the phone asking those questions, right?
Yeah, and it wasn't just me; it's several other guys that we have that we're all in the same position. That it just was always being, what do we do? What do we do? How do we pack these parts? How do we do this? What do we do here? And it just is. Not only are you, like you said, you're wasting the time of a guy to come in and ask that question, but you're also wasting the machine time. Often that guy is doing a setup or helping someone else out, so they'll sit there and wait. And if I'm in the middle of something, it takes me a few minutes to answer the question and then remember what I was doing before. It just is so much wasted time.
Yeah, definitely snowballs, isn't it?
Yeah.
All right, so then fast forward a couple more months into March 2020, and what happened then?
Well, I don't know. I heard a rumor that there was something major happen in March 2020 that, kind of a few people might have heard about, some coronavirus or.
Yes.
Obviously hate to make light of a very serious situation, but from the business standpoint, March was a very strenuous month, as we first off had to go through with trying to become or make sure we were designated as an essential business. But then the worry became not only protecting our employees, obviously first and foremost, but if there became an instance where a mandatory quarantine, specifically myself, for 2 weeks, as was the case if you were diagnosed or still are diagnosed, but with COVID-19. So kind of this thought the risk that our eyes were open to in March was, what happens if I can't be here for 2 weeks? How do we manage?
Yeah. Right.
So really were kind of, as we were trying to talk or keep on fix what bugs you, obviously it became even more obvious that we needed to do something, and do something quick, to ensure that at the very least we're able to somewhat manage without myself or without another key person in the company being here, kind of that remote access type of thing.
Yeah. Okay. And I imagine did your workload kind of slow up a bit as well as customers canceled or just pushed out due dates and stuff?
Yeah, we really saw several of our customers slow up significantly. Also, we had a lot of people that it's like, well, if we're not going on vacation, if there's not a ball game on TV, what else is there to do besides work? So we had some guys that were working some extra hours, self included. So that kind of created a little bit of free time this spring that we haven't had recently.
And was that that and the fixing what bugs you, was that kind of the impetus for you to reach out again and say, hey, let's do it now for real?
Yeah, it just so much was happening on a daily basis that I just knew the longer we waited to implement this system, the more we were just losing out by not having it in place.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously knowing that kind of there wasn't a whole lot going on through this time or through until the states started open back up, I kind of knew it was a great time to do it because I could set the system up the way I wanted it to be set up.
Right. Yeah, I applaud you for that. I think when companies face times of crisis, there's kind of two responses. One is they might, kind of shelter down, try to cut all their costs, go down to bare minimum and just kind of weather it out. And there's companies more like what you're doing, where you reinvest in your company, spend the time wisely to get better systems, do lean improvements, whatever that might be, and then be stronger when things start to pick back up again.
Well, and I'm quite young to be able to speak to this, but I feel like with the downtime, that you've got to be conservative about what you're doing. You've got to watch every little penny and be very careful, because the way I've said it to a lot of salespeople on the phone, I have to look at is this worth it? Like, however, even a small expense is, if this means that I can't pay somebody 10 hours worth of pay, can I look them in the eye knowing that I gave the go ahead on spending this money that could have been used to keep a guy working longer? So it's definitely something you have to be very conscientious of. But at the same time, our customers are all in the same boat. They're going to be pinching pennies. So when they're pinching pennies, how can we help them to pinch those pennies? How can we cut lead time so they can have less stock? How can we cut prices, or ensure that our prices are staying the same for them? And that's really a lot of what drove us to Proshop.
Nice. Yeah, I like the way you tie an investment in something versus paying a person. That really personalizes it, and it's important. Those folks that work for you, they're relying on that paycheck to support their families. And I know at ProCNC, I was basically the sales guy, and I took that to heart every day, that if I didn't bring enough work, those folks weren't going to get a paycheck, and that's a serious responsibility.
Yeah, I've been through it before. I've laid guys off. I'm thankful I've been able to call them all back when I've laid them off. But I've cut hours, and I don't feel like I'm doing my job right if I have to do that. Like, we're not, as a company, they need to be knowing that we can provide them a full paycheck every single week. So I really take that very seriously.
That's awesome, Andy. All right, so I guess to fast forward to the present, so we talked again. You said, yeah, let's do this thing. And then what's that been like? So who is your implementation person? I actually don't know who you got assigned.
Vince is
Oh,
our
Vince. Right on.
implementation person.
Yeah.
Um,
And so, yeah, maybe you should just describe a little bit about what the initial stages of starting the training and implementation has been like.
yeah, so I think we probably signed up about 1 month ago.
Okay.
Um, and we started training just shy of 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago today, Vince and I first were introduced, and we talked about what pace we wanted to go through things and kind of how we wanted to handle it, who needed to be involved. Uh, Dealt with a lot of the logistics of how we were going to do the training. And then we started training just shy of 2 weeks ago. The thing that I really enjoyed, or that I enjoyed from the beginning, was that your company was there to teach us how we wanted to be taught. And what I mean is that if you were willing to be a very hands-on type of training, or do a lot less hands-on, which is what we wanted, of just give us the basics and let us kind of learn at our own pace and figure a lot of the things out our way. And that was what was really impressed me right off the bat about Proshop.
And can you describe a little bit about how you and Vince are actually tracking the progress and the learning objectives, or what you need to be trained on?
Well, the cool thing about the training that I've liked so far is that it's laid out just like a work order would be for any customer. So as we're going through, we're completing it operation by operation, just like we would a work order. So it's really given me a lot of practice of just going into the work order, being able to see what's in each operation. And the cool thing about that is that in each operation, there's actually videos, training videos for what we're going to address.
Mm-hmm. And then, so yeah, so to be more specific, you're using Proshop to learn how to use Proshop, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. And yeah, we run our own software company on Proshop also. But yes, for those unfamiliar, we issue a work order in every client system that has a complete workflow, starting from the initial intro meeting all the way to where you're turning off your old ERP system, with all the steps, all the learning objectives, some combination of videos. And then I imagine you've also been doing live training with Vince using Zoom or screen share. Is that right?
Yeah, we're doing we started out as 3 nights a week. Now we've scaled it back to 2 longer nights a week. We're hopping on. I pretty much share my screen most of the night, and Vince shows me what I need to do, and then we do a couple practice of whatever it is that we're working on that night, and then usually he gives me the homework of completing a few more of whatever we were working on, so that way he knows that I've got a good grasp of it when we come back for our next training session.
And then we're recording all those, or Vince is recording all those and providing you with those videos. Have you gone back to watch any of those to refresh something that he taught you?
Actually, we just the first one we did was that we actually utilized was was an import, and it was very cool because it was kind of a task that I wanted to hand off. It just was a lot of data entry. So I Vince sent me the video. I passed that along to my sister, who's our office manager, and she was able to learn on the fly how to do an import into Proshop.
That's fantastic. I love it. I love it. Cool. And have you felt like Vince understands your business? Do you know a little bit of his background?
Yeah, I don't know much, or I probably should know, but I know, he's obviously had a manufacturing background, I believe, at Pro CNC. Is that
Yeah,
correct?
yep, yeah. Vince did work for us for 7, 8 years, I think, and was maybe even was a machinist, but certainly worked in our inspection department and as a quality and QMS person as well. So he's particularly strong in that area. But yeah, we pretty much employ all of our training and implementation folks have strong machine shop or manufacturing backgrounds. They're not people that just don't have a lot of experience. So we get feedback that our customers really appreciate the fact they can they speak their language. They know, what, why you're asking the questions and the context of why it's important. And you're not having to explain it to them to have them explain how Proshop works.
Yeah, that's definitely something we've noticed, or I've noticed through the first couple of weeks of training is that when we get into a more technical term, Vince isn't shying away. He knows what we're talking, or at the very least, he's kind of close to knowing what we're talking about. And given that you guys are a software company, that's very impressive for us to be able to have that knowledge of machining deep in his heart.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, he's a good guy. We're lucky to have him. Well, that kind of takes us up to today. Any other thoughts or things you'd like to share before we wrap it up and catch up the next week or two?
Well, I mean, I think on a daily basis, I'm just today found something that it's like, oh wow, I didn't know I could do that. So it's just such an exciting thing for me to be that all that we're going to be able to do inside of Proshop and all those binders over my shoulder there that we're going to be able to get rid of, or at the very least file away to the back of a closet.
Mm-hmm.
And while improving our company, it's very exciting.
That's so great. Yeah, this is what we live for, is having guys like you make your job easier, allow you to grow your company, hire more people, get to the golf course a little more often maybe, and help your company thrive. That's what it's all about. Machine shops are so important, all manufacturing, but machine shops in particular, I believe, they're really at the ground level of all of our economy. Everything we make starts with machining in some way. And it's important that those companies thrive and survive.
Yeah, I think for all of us that just went through or coming out of the shutdowns, one of the neatest thing for our industry was that for the most part, machine shops and manufacturing were not shut down. They were deemed essential businesses. And I think we all can take a lot of pride in that, because it just shows you how important we are to the day-to-day life of Americans.
Sure enough.
And as I think we're a lot of the conversations we're having, and as being a member of trade organizations, is how do we deal with the labor shortage? And I think Paul Akers' lean theory can be applied to that we've got to just kind of figure out, we've got to make things more lean. How do we make things more lean and do it with less people if we have to? And Proshop is going to be an instrumental part of that for us.
That's awesome, Andy. I appreciate it. Well, cool. This has been super fun. Thanks again for the idea, even just bringing it up. This is the first time we've done this with a customer, kind of profiling their implementation process kind of in real time as they do it over the weeks. So I look forward to catching up with you in another week or two and doing another installment and talking again.
Yeah, absolutely. Likewise.
All right. Thanks again, Andy. Have a good rest of your evening. And
you too.
We'll talk to you soon.
Talk to you there.